Testing. You should hear me now. Can you guys hear me now? If you would give me a Evil Simeon, if you would give me a thumbs up in the comments. Because if we're getting good sound check, I'll just start back at the beginning of the show. So thank you. Okay. So cheers, everybody. I will start the show over again to what I meant to tell you. Welcome back to Full Throttle Moto. I'm Full Throttle Moto31. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Evil Simeon. I'm your host, DJ. I just got off the phone with the boss, Kayla. Kayla is in Brainerd right now in anticipation of the Moto America race there with her Rahal Ducati Moto Super Sport. She was doing a riding school this weekend, and so she's going to stay the week in Minnesota. She does school remotely, and then she will be ready for practice on Friday. Maddie, the other boss, Maddie Patterson, is Maddie is at the TT with her husband Simon. This is a huge event for Maddie and Simon Patterson. These guys are very sort of, yeah, I know. Oh, did you see her there? Oh, is that Evil Simeon? Did you? Okay, Evil Simeon. I don't know if you saw her there or if that is actually Simon Patterson himself. But yeah. So anyway, this is a big event for their family. I believe Simon is doing the play-by-play for the event there, or color commentary for the TT. So go and check that out. Those guys are awesome. And let's see what else is going on. I meant Kayla. Kayla is doing well. Yeah, she's trying to. The last comments we had, we talked about her favorite rider in the world is Marc Marquez. We're talking about how gangster he is. We're going to get into that during the course of this show. But Kayla is coming to terms with this Rahal Ducati and trying to figure out how to make it turn, how to make it do what she wants, and adapt her riding style to it, and to a degree, obviously, adapt the motorcycle to her riding style. But yeah, I am sure that we're probably a few races away before her coming to synthesis with that super sport bike, and then being up at the front with PJ. You know, her teammate is obviously a world-class rider that has competed in Europe and competed at many different levels. Also been watching the TT as well. You should, right? Got to watch Simon there, and I'm sure Maddie's like all over the paddock. So anyway, so that's what's going on. Let's get to, so I've got some hot takes. Some of you are probably going to be pissed off by my hot takes, but as I like to say, I don't hot take for the sake of having a hot take. I hot take or throw out a take when it's something that I feel deeply about and I have a reason and can back that up with certain types of data. And so let me read you my first take, and then we'll get to my second take that you also might hate. Okay, hot take is Casey Stoner. I have heard a couple of journalists and or former racers say, I wish Casey Stoner were in charge of making the rules, or they are always love to quote when Casey Stoner gives his thoughts on the current bikes, the current riders, the current state of MotoGP, and the technological aspects of MotoGP, etc. So my hot take is, I don't care what Casey Stoner thinks! Exclamation point, exclamation point. So you might say, oh, well, you're an ingrate. I mean, he is one of the greatest riders of all time. One of the guys that the riders call an alien. Got Ducati their first championship in MotoGP. Amazing, incredible rider. However, in any sport, and you're talking about a guy who's almost 60, I'm 57 years old. In any sport, there is always going to be venerable people that are going to say, oh, it's not as good as when I was in it. Now, look at the NFL, all right? National Football League, obviously you guys can know. I'm a Yank. I'm an American. I played football at the collegiate and semi-pro level. And in the NFL in 2016, they changed the quarterback rules so that you cannot drill the quarterback into the turf. You had to, there's very specific ways that you can hit the quarterback, and it's very easy to get called for a flagrant foul in the NFL now. people of my generation or people who played during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s would have said, these guys aren't tough. I mean, it's not the same anymore. These guys, they're not doing it the way that we did. You might as well put a skirt on the quarterback. They would make comments like that. Well, no, this is what they call progress for the NFL. You have a defensive player there. Me as a former defensive player would hit the quarterback, but you have a person who's opened up in a throwing motion. People would drill that player in the ribs and drive them into the turf as hard as they could. This is not something that the NFL determined is in its best interest. Similarly, in motorcycle racing, they determined that having aero and keeping the bike stuck to the road made it safer and allowed for higher corner speeds. We don't see a lot of the vicious high sides that they had seen previously, particularly in the two-stroke era that people will talk about and other eras in MotoGP. So, and they're going to dial back the horsepower and the displacement of these engines and make the aero a little smaller so that they hopefully slow the bikes down and make it a little safer. Because while we know inherently this is an extremely dangerous sport, we don't want it to be unsafe for the riders, no matter what kind of enjoyment that we want to have. We know it's very, very dangerous for these riders. So whatever they need to do to manage safety, I let the experts handle that. And similarly, the experts have decided that this tech in certain areas will make the bikes faster and stick to the road better. The Michelin tires are extremely grippy, grippier than they've ever been. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job, and I don't care what older riders think about today's riders and bikes. I care what current riders think about the bikes and them as and the organization that they work for and their cadre. I don't care what older riders say, just like I don't care what old NFL players say. In 1995, Formula One did away with the manual gearbox and the H-pattern gearbox. Now they have automatic transmission and they shift right on the wheel. Riders of that generation would have said, man, this isn't as good. I mean, these guys aren't as talented. We used to have to clutch and everything. I mean, it's too easy for these guys. That is progress in every sport. So, sorry, suck it up. Don't care what the old guys think. Respect and love, just like I could go on about the history of NFL, NBA players, all kinds of MMA, all the sports I'm familiar with. I could go in deep on those and how much I love and respect. But when they start talking about today's game, I don't care. Don't care what you think, because there's always going to be, it's not as good as when we did it. It's always going to be that way in every sport without exception. So, man, these guys train so much harder. Now they're using performance-enhancing drugs, and they have shakes, and they have all kinds, and they're taking shots of stuff. We didn't have that. Tough. I mean, that's progress. So, let's go. Next hot take. Next hot take is from, and by the way, a shout out and love to the Race-MotoGP Podcast, Paddock Pass MotoGP Podcast, Oxley-Bom MotoGP Podcast. You will see the links for all those in the show notes. Plus, since I'm making attributions to their work, you will see APA citations in the show notes as well when I publish this episode. So all love and respect to those podcasts. Also, Simon Crafar was on Oh My God MotoGP Podcast. Simon Crafar is an amazing resource of information. I mean, if you sit and watch those shows where he's with Jack Appleyard or Louis Sotheby or whomever, he is brilliant. So, you're going to learn a lot about the sport listening to those guys. And obviously everything motor racing. I love them. Let me see what their name is. I think it's Declan. I'm trying to remember. The young gentleman who runs it is great. And the young lady is Lauren with the amazing Northern Irish accent. I just love those guys. So I'm a fan of all the MotoGP podcasts, and I use that all to inform that, plus just observations and reading between the lines. So we're going to get to Paddock Pass. We're going to get to Manuel Pacino and his prediction that this was going to happen on May 9th. So we're going to get to all that. So here we go. on Oxley-Bom, Matt Oxley, talking about very, very accurate comments made last week about Enea Bastianini. Peter Baum had a go at Bastianini for sleepwalking through the first part of the race and then waking up finally and then deciding that he needed to repass Mark's overtake on him, figuring out he needed to re-overtake Mark and go and make a run at this at this podium. And of course, as you know, he ended up number 2 in the race. He ended up passing Jorge, did a fantastic job. Jorge left the door open for him and he took it. I agree with Peter Baum's comments on that. Not that he needs me to agree with him. The only thing I disagree with him, he said that it's not befitting of a factory rider to ride and act the way that he does, that he doesn't go after it in that manner that they're used to seeing motorbike racers go after it. And that is fair enough. I can't argue with them. The only thing I would argue with him is when he dedicated the race to the death of his dog, and he said, I don't think that is befitting of a factory racer, and that's not professional. I was just like, dude, what are you talking about? I mean, that's humanity. I mean, Pecco could have, if his dog had died, or Mark, they might have said something like that. I don't think that is the reason why that Enea perhaps needs to look at his style and take it a little more seriously and not sleepwalk through races. But saying that he's dedicating the race to his dog, I think that's awesome. I think any rider could and should do that. And I don't think that anyone in factory Ducati or any factory would say that the rider shouldn't do that. And if they do, I would basically tell them F off. Like, I mean, I would tell, just to give you an idea, I'll personalize this. When I was living in England, I was stationed there with the Air Force. I was testing for Master Sergeant, and it's once a year. You have to sign, you get a test date, you show up on that test date, and come hell or high water, if you don't show up and you don't test, you don't get to move to that next rank. I was testing for Master Sergeant. My dog that was maybe, I don't know, maybe 18 years old, she woke up in a really, really bad way. I thought this was the end for her. I went to take her to the veterinarian. And somehow she immediately just got better. And I think we had her for another month or so, and then she declined again and finally passed. But the fact that I missed my test for Master Sergeant, and my first sergeant said, "Oh, you missed the test for Master Sergeant. What happened?" I said, "Man, I had to take Wolfie to the hospital. I thought she was going to die." "Oh, well, now I'm going to have to try to get you another test." I was like, you know what? Don't do me any favors, man. I don't care what you do. I'm going to take care of my dog. And if that's my family, and if anybody else doesn't like it, I got a couple of fingers for you. That's all I get to say. So shout out to Enea Bastianini for doing that. I'm sorry you lost your ride. We're going to get to you too during the course of the show. Okay. So what Matt Oxley was talking about was about Bastianini and Peter Baum, his occasionally, let's call it his dispassionate attitude towards riding, by which his own admission sees him sometimes sleeping through races and then finally waking up. Apparently he had said this, I heard on one of the pods, he said this to Davide Tardazzi. Not a very good move. Yeah, I think that might have been an Oxley-Bom's podcast. This morphed, though, this conversation between Matt and Peter Baum morphed into a conversation about how they should go back to a bonus paid, quote, bonus pay system, i.e., no paychecks, and you only get paid a bonus if I guess depending upon what your grid position. Just like Mick Doohan, he said, just like Mick Doohan did, which he turned into another 5 minutes on 2-stroke 500s and how difficult they are to ride and yada, yada, yada. I got news for you. That is absolutely nuts. There is no way I would advocate it, just like I wouldn't do it for myself in any competition. There is no way I would ever advocate that riders go to a bonus paid system and not be paid. That is just out of his. I don't care if Mick Doohan did it. Good for Mick Doohan. There is no way that should be a system today. There's no way that you could raise a family hoping that you're going to win. You go out there, they pay you, they do very short contracts compared to other sports. You're talking a year and 2-year contracts. and they're performance-based contracts. You got that because you either kicked ass in Moto 2 or Moto 3 or Moto 2 or World Superbike or World Supersport. They didn't just give you that seat in MotoGP. And there's no reason that they should go to that system. And if they you don't perform, like very sadly, this we believe is I hope sadly it's going to happen to Augusto Fernandez. And I'm sad about that because I think the guy is awesome and he's an excellent rider. He's a great rider in Moto 2. And I'm sorry that he hasn't been able to find that performance, right? But there's no way they should go to a moto-based, a bonus-based system, as Matt said. I think that's really stupid, and I would never advocate for something like that ever. And it's simply the empath. I wouldn't want to be in that system. It's kind of like being a commission-based car salesman, and even today, what they end up doing is they'll pay them a salary, and then they deduct, for when they make a big sale, they'll deduct that off of their commission and stuff. I would never advocate for that in MotoGP. So that is my second and last hot take of the day. So don't worry about me throwing any more fire. Shout out. I'm channeling my inner Simon Patterson with these hot takes, like Jack Miller should go to World Superbike, or that Jack Miller would be replaced at factory KTM, which was a really awesome and hot take by Simon Patterson very early in the season. I didn't think it would happen simply because I don't think that I didn't think that KTM would want to upset the balance. There's a balance there. First of all, Pedro Acosta already has a factory bike. I mean, it's clear in all the broadcasts that he's representing KTM, even though his bike says Gas and Pure Mobility Group. So why would you want to upset two garages with swapping personnel and having to get used to new riders and new settings? And I just didn't think that would happen. And obviously, it's not going to happen. It'll happen next year. But you know what? Who knows? I mean, if it's bad enough, or if Jack Miller were to get something, if he got injured this year or something, or, their performances are bad enough, maybe they will. Maybe Simon will be right. I didn't think it would, but it could be that before the end of the year, that if his performances are bad enough, maybe they'll make that swap early. It's quite possible. And contractually, we don't know what Jack's contract says. He obviously said that he would ride that gas bike next year. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near that gas bike next year. Sadly, I think he'll move on, and maybe he can assist Honda in their project to upgrade their machine to something else. All right. Here we go. Let's go to, I was going to say it was great material in the Oxley-Bom podcast, and whereby Peter Baum and Matt talk about how Marc Marquez, when he was at Honda, how gangster, because the subject of this next part of the podcast is how gangster Marc Marquez is. And I know, like, right now you're thinking, DJ, I know how gangster Marc Marquez is. I am going to show you how he's even more gangster than you thought. And by the way, anybody who's watching right now, if you want to come on the pod and speak with me, you are welcome to. If you DM me on Twitter/X at Call All Beings, I will, just because I'm logged into that account. Full Throttle Moto31 is also my account. But it's our account as a group. So, all these opinions you're hearing today is strictly DJ. It is not reflective of Matty Patterson. It is not reflective of Kaylee Yakov. So let me just bring up X real quick. In case one of you DMs me, I will send you the link to get in the studio. So let me just switch over to my other account. And there we go. Right now I have my Twitter/X account up. If somebody wants to come on and give me their opinions and log on and talk about stuff tonight, just hit me up, DM me at Call All Beings, and then I will send you the link to get in the show. All right, moving right along. Marc Marquez, how gangster is this brother? I'm about to tell you. Okay, so he said, those guys on Oxley-Bom said, and I will make full attribution to all the podcasts I've discussed tonight with links and with APA style citations. They said that when Mark was at Honda, he would be offered all the new parts first. Occasionally, he would tell them to put a part on that he thought wouldn't work, and it would be detrimental to his teammates' performance, but he could ride around it, and so it would slow them down, but it wouldn't bother him. And that is how gangster this guy was. How gangster. Now, I'm going to talk about something even more gangster that he did. I want you guys to kind of recognize this, okay? Marc Marquez. Okay, this is crazy. Marc Marquez, in turning down that Gresini seat, okay, so it was in the works that, okay, when he said, I will not going to Prima Pramac Racing is not an option for me. So we're like, oh, wait a minute. He said he wants a 2025 bike. Well, maybe they'll just bring the 2025 bike and just give him one at Gresini, and then his brother will stay on the older bike. This dude is so gangster that no, he basically is like, I want the factory machine. So he leaves. Then because of that, it looks like Prima Pramac is going to leave Ducati and go to Yamaha. But now he will go to the factory and have 30 engineers and technicians, what they have, in the garage over there in factory Lenovo Ducati. And what about his brother? Because if he would have stayed at Gresini, in the Gresini garage, they would have been obliged to keep Alex in the garage next to Mark, even though he might have been on year-old machinery. He might have been on a 24, and Mark was on a 25. Instead, he's like, look, every man for himself. I'm going to the factory. I want to smoke Pecco and show him that nobody can perform on this motorcycle like I can. That is gangster. Because on the one hand, we have Marco Bezzecchi last year, and believe me, I love Bez. I love his hair. He looks like Marco Simoncelli. I love everything about Bez. But man, this is a business. Remember what Jay-Z said? I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. And so last year, they offer him that Prima Pramac bike, which he could have been sitting pretty near the top of the championship right now on that brand new motorcycle, that 2024 Spec Ducati. And instead, he says, no, I really love my friends in VR46, and I feel so comfortable in this environment. I think I'll stay there. Dude, are you nuts? Have you totally lost it? Not only is Mark going to leave the garage where he's comfortable, where he's doing salsa dancing and singing with his garage, he's leaving his brother behind at Gresini, not knowing whether or not he's going to have a contract. That's the difference between a gangster pro ready to take your head off in Marc Marquez over here and Marco Bezzecchi saying, I'm really going to miss my friends and family in VR46. Dude, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? This is professional sports, professional racing. You guys are bullfighters, right? You guys are basically like MMA fighters on motorcycles. What are you doing, man? I mean, that is what that is basically what that is your contrast right there. One guy says, not only will I leave the team that I was with, regardless of what bike they're going to give me, I'm going to leave my brother back there. And now they can look to replace both of us if they so desire, because I'm not even on the team anymore. They would obviously think, oh, well, if we got Mark in the garage, I mean, we probably should keep Alex. So Alex could end up somewhere else now. I don't know. Alex is an excellent rider. He's not Mark, but he's an excellent MotoGP. He's a good MotoGP rider. I don't know if excellent is the right word. Maybe, I don't know how many races you need to win, half a dozen races to say that about somebody, but he's a good rider, you know, but Marco Bezzecchi was third in the championship last year. He should be on that 2024 spec bike right now, and not Franco Morbidelli, but one guy, Marquez, gangster, Bezzecchi, not gangster, because you can't be thinking about friends and all these kinds of things when this is sports, this is business. You want to kill and destroy everybody on the track, and you need the best machinery to do that. And by all accounts, I heard Neil Morrison say on Paddock Pass podcast that actually Jorge has made a very good strides in the garage in Pramac. And that actually he has coalesced the team around him, and it's a very good vibe. So all reports are that Jorge's doing very well there. If you listen to Manuel Pacino, so let's get to that now, because the last podcast we did, this move had not been made yet. So a week ago when we did this podcast, we didn't know where, I think it was last week. We didn't know, or it might have been the week before. We didn't know if Mark was going to go or not. We were hypothesizing. I had picked Jorge early, after the first race of the season. And the only reason I was starting to think Mark was only not because of any knowledge that I have or any sort of incredible forethought, but there were certain signs. Manuel Pacino and I'm just going to check Twitter in case anyone's trying to get in here. But yeah, feel free to DM me if you're wanting to come in and give your thoughts on what's happening here. You are more than welcome to come in and join the conversation here with me, or converse with me, I should say, because nobody's conversing with me except me. And I'm going to tell you, in 14 years of podcasting, I do not enjoy doing solo podcasts. I want to have a co-host always. But the ladies are busy. They're doing things, and so, I need whomever to fill in until they come back and when they're ready to come back. So anyway, so Manuel Pacino said on the May 9th episode of Paddock Pass podcast, I think it was May 8th or May 9th. So it was nearly a month before this announcement. He said that they were going to pick Marc Marquez. He said, I've spoken to Gigi Dall'Igna, and Gigi Dall'Igna said that he would want to see, and it was interesting to him. First of all, he talked about the entire history of the rider, and that he got the impression that he wanted to see how far this motorcycle could go. He's an engineer first, and as it was reported, he had told Claudio Domenicali when he took over that he wanted full control of the team. Nobody would be able to override his decisions. So he said he doesn't care what Pecco thinks. He said he believes that riders don't run the team runs the team, and the riders do the riding. They do their part. And so you saw that all of that, everything Manuel Pacino of, I think it's at Manuel GP, something like that, and I'll find his Twitter and I'll post it in the show notes. I'm sure you guys are aware of him, a Spanish journalist. He said that they make the decisions. They don't rely on the riders to decide, oh, I like this guy better, I don't like that guy. They want to see that both of their bikes are 1 and 2 in all these races. That's what they're looking for. And you could say that other than probably Austin, where Pedro Acosta said there was no human on this earth that was going to beat Maverick Vinales today in either race, either the sprint or the main race. And these guys know what they're talking about. Pardon me. Very unprofessional. So that's it. Basically, I want to give a shout out to Manuel Pacino because as far as I know, he had this first. That was in the Paddock Pass Notes show on May 9th. He had no doubt that they were going to pick Mark for all the reasons that have been stated. And like, I think, I heard, again, I listened to the race today, and I'm trying to think that I think Simon said part of the move in signing Mark was to keep Mark from going to another factory. I will disagree with that to the extent that I believe that could have been a secondary reason. I believe the primary reason was for what was stated, what Manuel Pacino said, that they wanted two of the strongest riders on the grid. He also spoke about 2027. You sign a rider next year to a 2-year deal. That rider next year and into 2026 is in full development of that 2027 motorcycle. Full development. So if you were making that move, anybody here that's listening, would you rather have Jorge Martin making that move, or would you rather have Marc Marquez analyzing that new bike and developing that new bike? So if you listen to Simon Crafar, and I think this may be changing because recently Jorge talked about changing his settings, that he would always go into the race with the same settings, and now he's looking at that and thinking about how he can and should and will change some settings, and I think that's a good evolution. But Simon Crafar said at one point he went up and he asked Jorge about some settings that he was using at the track, and Jorge said, "I don't know." And Simon Crafar is like, "What? You don't know? You don't know what settings you're using? Are you kidding me?" So he was incredulous that Jorge Martin did not know his settings, whereas Mark might be able to tell you every setting that he has on the bike and how many clicks. So obviously there could, what Manuel Pacino said, there could be an element of this in addition to the data that they're looking at, that Mark is doing things on the 2023 that nobody's doing, and also the development of the wanting to evoke the most out of this package. What could this 2025 package be with the best rider that maybe ever, maybe not, but maybe ever, that we've seen on that motorcycle? What kind of gains could we realize? Could he take it further than Pecco? We don't know. We assume so, but we don't know, because Pecco's on the best bike with the best factory with the best settings with the blah 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 blah. Another thing I learned from Simon on the Race MotoGP podcast that I want to put out there for some of you who haven't heard this. I assumed that Mark was riding Pecco's 2023 championship bike minus like the whole shot device. What Simon let us know is that is not true. That actually he is riding a zero spec bike that is not nearly up to date with what Pecco won the championship with. And that is something that I was unaware of. I knew they were going to have not going to have the new whole shot device. I did not know that it was a zero spec, several steps below what Pecco finished the season on. So you all have to take that into account. Mark is not going to tell you, oh, the reason I'm not beating these guys is because they have a better bike. Because tough guys in the sport don't say things like that. That's kind of like crybaby talk. Even though it's legitimate, it's a completely legitimate point to make, Mark is not going to make that point, and he hasn't. He does think that, though, and how do you know he thinks that? You know he thinks that because he said, I want a current spec bike. He's not saying, I can't beat him because I don't have a current spec bike, but he's saying, next season, I want a current spec bike. So that tells you what, because I've seen at least 3 press conferences where both he and Pecco are asked about it. If I were Pecco, I would probably say, okay, that bike is not as good as ours. First of all, it doesn't have the horsepower, doesn't have the power, and in any case, they're not able to get the power to the ground and have that corner exit that we have. I don't know all those things. Mark knows because he's ridden behind Pecco, and he's ridden behind Bastianini, and he's ridden behind Jorge Martin. So he knows exactly what those bikes have in terms of on-track performance, even if he doesn't know how they've achieved that over what his bike has. He doesn't know, probably all the differences unless Frankie Carcetti or somebody knows and is telling him. But clearly, Mark thinks the reason I don't think he'll win a championship this year, even if he does win a couple of races, is because I don't think the bike is close enough. I think Pecco is an amazing rider on an amazing package, and I don't think Mark would be able to overcome him in enough races, barring injuries, all things being equal. I don't think he would be able to get enough in order to overtake Pecco for the championship. It would be now is the storyline for us as fans, unless you're just a Ducati Lenovo or you're a Pecco Bagnaia fan, which I'm not. I don't know. I root for a lot of riders. I root for Pedro, etc. I root for Fabio Quartararo. I think he's absolutely amazing. I think he's one of the aliens on the grid. I love when Maverick Vinales wins and all that. But it's a better storyline if Mark wins than if Pecco just runs off, like the next 5 or 6 races and the season's over for everybody else. It's more interesting when there's another rider in the mix. Obviously, which is why Carmelo Espeleta had said this week that this is not what he wanted, that he didn't want Mark going to factory Ducati. Well, guess what, Carmelo? Because Mark went to Ducati, Prima Pramac is probably now going to Yamaha. Isn't that what you guys wanted? You wanted to level the grid more. You wanted to level the playing field. I know my hand doesn't look level now. Level. You wanted a level playing field. Well, now instead of the Ducati having 8 bikes that they're pulling data from, now it's only 6, and Yamaha will potentially have 4 bikes that is pulling data from. That will create parity in the grid. That will mean every team will have 4 bikes on the grid, except for Ducati, which will have 6. An embarrassment of riches, right? So I think Carmelo, he did you a favor if Prima Pramac Racing goes to Yamaha as a result of Mark going to factory Ducati. So Mark is total gangster, just total gangster. All right, let's move on. What about Enea? So apparently, is it Carlo Pernat or Carlos Pernat? But anyway, Enea Bastianini's manager is reporting that he is going to KTM Gas. Very interesting. I'm curious what you guys think about that. What you think about, and please hit us up at Full Throttle Moto31 at gmail.com if you have any thoughts on what that portends for Enea going to Gas. In my mind, I'll tell you, I'm not expecting huge things. And obviously, you are doing the math just like I'm doing the math. You are saying, well, he has the best bike on the grid right now with the most tech, with the best everything, and he's having good results, but he's not having great results. So what would lead us to believe that he's going to dominate the grid if he's on KTM Gas? I'm kind of like, another thing that Simon said that was really interesting on the Race-MotoGP podcast is an interesting way to think. And I'm sure this has been through the mind of some of you. I just don't know that I actually compartmentalized it or contextualized it this way. Is it that Pedro Acosta is making the KTM look good? Or is it that the KTM is so deficient that it's making Brad and Jack look bad? So that's really interesting because Pedro's saying we have a great package. So the question is that just mean for you? Is it like a Marc Marquez situation where even with obviously, this bike, this KTM package is nowhere near the garbage packages that Mark has had to, and I hate to say that because I don't want to make a dig on Honda. They're one of my favorite bikes I ever had was my Honda 600 F3. But And I've had every man. I've had Kawasaki, KTM. I haven't had Aprilia. I've had a lot. Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, KTM, Yamaha, Indian. So I've had quite a few bikes and Buell. But I this is nowhere near the package that Mark had, but clearly Pedro is making the most of this package in the way that Mark was way ahead of the other Honda riders on that package, and you can see now it's kind of like Jorge Johan Zarco is just a little bit better than the rest of the guys that are riding a Honda right now. For whatever reason, he's able to analyze and even he got pitched off, I think, in Mugello as well. It was terrible, tough time. I really do feel for Honda. So Bastianini on that KTM gas. I think will do pretty well, but I'm not expecting him to be a championship contender unless and until he has what, Pecco did a few years ago. I think he might have seen a sports psychologist or something and, goes and really gets the idea that he's going to come into the race and sort of extract all of his talents out for every race, for every practice session, and not sleepwalk through things. If he changes, again, what those guys said, what Peter Baum said is true. He doesn't look like, comport himself like a factory rider. And that's why he's losing his factory ride. He doesn't seem driven that he has to do these things. That you can see how driven Pecco is. Pecco, you beat him on a Friday in terms of qualifying. He has poor qualifying sessions. And maybe you beat him in a sprint race and then he comes back and just kills you in the main race. I mean, he's just an incredibly mentally durable rider who will respond to something negative with something very positive. I think Enea Bastianini needs that. The question is, who do you guys think will show up in that seat? So right now, let me see. Looking at the race. So right now you have Jorge Martin in Aprilia and TBA to be announced. If you want to say who's going to be sitting alongside Jorge Martin, will it be, would Mav make the move to Gas? I wouldn't think so. It'd be less money. So you would think he would want to go to, Factory Honda is the only place where he's going to make more money than he's making now. So I don't know where else he would go. So they have one spot at Yamaha, one spot at Factory Honda next to Luca Marini and his great hair. Fermin Aldeguer. They haven't announced what team he's going to. We know it's not going to be VR46. We don't think it'll be Pramac because we think Pramac is going to go to Yamaha, which means that we would expect him to go to Gresini Ducati and await a teammate there. Will that be Alex Marquez? It might be. Or is there another rider out there? Could it be Joan Mir? Or is Joan Mir pining for Factory Aprilia? That could be a thing. So I think you're going to get a next tier rider. Would that be a Di Antonio? I don't know. It could be just status quo and just stay with Alex Marquez. Trackhouse, they haven't announced anybody. I think Raul is there for sure. I think Miguel's in trouble. I just don't see what, and I think we said this in the last podcast, I don't see what we're going to learn about Miguel Oliveira that we have not learned. He's a good rider, but he's had a lot more downs than he has ups. I realize he was hurt in Portimao, I think last year, where a couple of guys got really hurt in that first race, but I just don't, I just don't expect him. I certainly don't think he's going to move up to the factory seat. I think they really want Maverick to be in that seat based on what they announced, but we don't know what Maverick wants. If he wants money, then he has to go to Factory Honda because that's the only place he's going to go to get paid. Or, you can't imagine him returning to Factory Yamaha next to Fabio Quartararo. Could Alex Rins end up in a Gresini seat? Is that possible? That's a possibility. Would you want to have Alex Rins next to Fermin Aldeguer. I mean, that would be a good thing. Could you see Alex Marquez in Yamaha next to Fabio? I mean, there's some really, really interesting possibilities that are out there. What else do we have? What does Jorge to Factory Aprilia mean in terms of his skill set? What do you guys expect Jorge to do on that Aprilia? This is, I mean, when you listen to people that know these motorcycles, so we're listening to Simon Crafar, who loves that motorcycle. We're listening to Peter Baum, another guy with 25 years around on the grid as a data analyst and crew chief and stuff. Loves that motorcycle. The question is, can Factory Aprilia put together a package where that bike is ready to go every week? That bike is ready to race, and that they don't have a great Friday, a good Saturday, and then they just fall apart on Sunday. I mean, that they really need to, the thing with those guys getting cooked in India last year, and I realize India, I think Simon Patterson said it's the hottest he's ever been at a race in Buriram. There's no reason for the rider to be getting cooked because the air isn't being ducted properly away from the motorcycle. That's not acceptable, and that's something that that should have been caught in other types of testing, because the other riders didn't face that. So that's not good. And it kind of reminds me of 2 years ago when Honda was cooking some of the riders. I don't know if it was Brodel or somebody got really, really cooked on their lower leg, their lower extremity on that motorcycle. That's not acceptable. So anyway, I think that Jorge will be really competitive and really great. Will he rise to the level of what he's at on that factory Ducati? It's very, very difficult to say. It's very, very difficult to say. I don't know if he'll be that dominant right off the bat. You would have to think that it would take him several months of being on that bike to figure out what it does well, if what it does is different than what his bike now does well. And I'm not here. I mean, obviously everybody knows they talk about corner speed with the Aprilia. So it's really difficult to say. I wouldn't expect him to be right up at the front on that bike at the beginning of next year, but maybe slow incremental progress. And I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see Jorge up the front. If there would be nothing better than to see week by week in these sprint races that there is a factory Aprilia winning these races, because we want to see balance on the grid. It's not fun to see factory. Now, this is somebody who loves this move from Marquez. I love, factory Ducati is amazing. I don't necessarily want to see them win every week. I mean, that's not something that's cool. I also want to stitch back to one thing when talking about the 2024 and 2023 Ducati, about that. Nobody outside those garages knows exactly how much better one bike is than the other. We know what Mark said. We can make an inference from there. But as far as the settings, we don't know the difference between Jorge's bike and Pecco's bike. We don't know if there's any extra little things that are going on that they're doing with Pecco's bike that they're not having the Pramac guys do, even though I know they have, I believe each one of these satellite Ducati teams has a factory Ducati personnel. They have at least one person in the garage. I don't know. None of us know what they're doing to these factory bikes that makes them so dominant. I suspect they're doing something, but unless you work in that garage and you're wearing that red shirt, and even I don't even know if all of them know, they probably only know the secret sauce and some of the things and adjustments and settings and things that they're doing with that bike. Obviously, everybody can see the data they can see the output. I don't know that everybody necessarily knows the inputs that they're making that achieves the output. It's like I used to say to people, when I was really into jiu-jitsu, I got to go train with Rickson Gracie's assistant, a guy named Tony, American guy. Tony Pasensky's in the Air Force now. Amazing martial artist. And I got to go to Rickson Gracie's facility and roll with Tony. I was a blue belt, and Tony was a couple of striped black belt. And I said to him, I said, in all that you've learned from Rickson, I bet that there are things that Rickson Gracie has taught, and Rickson Gracie is arguably the greatest Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter ever. A guy who fought no rules fights as a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu fighter, and was, as far as we know, has never been defeated. And I said, there are probably things that Rickson has taught his son, Kron Gracie, that nobody else knows. And he said, I don't know. I can't say one or the other. And I was like, I know you can't. You probably don't even know. But I suspect there are things that Rickson Gracie shows his son, Kron, that he hasn't shown to anybody else. And similarly, I assume that Factory Ducati probably knows and are doing certain adjustments and making certain inputs on that bike that probably nobody else knows about or is doing. And I'll just leave it at that. And that's a complete speculation. But that's my guess. Oh, and that's what I gave that information earlier, that Simon's information about Mark's bike that I had no idea, is that Mark's bike is not Pecco's bike that he stepped off of from the championship last year. It's a Spec Zero type of a bike, several stages behind, although all of our journalist friends suspect that he will be getting more updates now that they know that he's coming to the factory next year, and they expect Jorge to probably have updates frozen, which they say is standard when you announce that you're leaving a team. They stop updating your bike, and that, I think that makes total sense to all of us. We can all see that, why you would do that. I think that's all I have for you guys tonight. Yeah, I've got all my references here. Yeah, I'm just really intrigued. I want to know who is going to be on these Trackhouse machines. Is Joe Roberts going to get a shot at that? I saw something the other day that Andrea Dovizioso is thinking about coming back. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, there is no... First of all, if you're Dovizioso, I mean, I guess all's fair in love and war. He could come back. There is no way that you should put that dude back on the grid. There is not enough seats for the talent out there now that there are guys, people think David Alonso, could ride one of these bikes. There is, in addition, there's, Iagura needs to come up and take that LCR Honda spot next to Johan Zarco. Will Johan Zarco move up to the factory and sit next to Luca Marini? I mean, that seems like the logical move that you would make. But if they're going to keep him in LCR Honda, I mean, Iagura's going to one of those two seats. I would imagine it's going to be LCR Honda next to Johan Zarco. It just depends on what they want to do. If they want to attract a better, if they want to attract a Maverick Vinales to sit next to Luca Marini and make a bunch of money and ride at the back of the pack for the next, 6 to 9 months or 12 months, by all means. But I'd love to know who is going to Trackhouse, who is going to sit next to Jorge Martin on Factory Aprilia, who is going to that other gas seat next to Enea Bastianini. And who would you want to go into that seat? I can't imagine Maverick going to a satellite team where he thinks he's going to make less money. But stranger things have happened. We don't know how financially solvent he is. We know how much money he spends. We know that Luca Marini appears to be regretting taking all that money from factory Honda, or at least, it doesn't, he doesn't put out vibes that he really digs it. Joan Mir got paid, and now he's, Joan Mir, you would have to think that Joan Mir is the number one draft pick from the free agents now. Wouldn't you? I mean, if you're VR46, what are you going to do with your riders? I mean, you have Bezzecchi and Antonio. There's nowhere for them to go now because there's probably not going to be a Pramac team with a 2025 motorcycle now. It's going to be a Yamaha team. Are they going to want to go to Pramac Yamaha? I mean, I don't think they're going to want to do that unless they're offering a significant amount of money, and maybe they are. But would you want to leave? I mean, I don't know. They're not tearing up the world with last year's Ducati. So it's this is fascinating stuff, guys. I mean, it's hard to get in somebody's mind and know what these guys want. I guess if I were making the grid, this is what I guess I should do that. I should make my own grid. So this is just what DJ would do. Please take this with a grain of salt. I'm going to make the assumption that Pramac is going to go to Yamaha. So let's do this. If it were me and I were Aprilia, I were Maverick, I would stay with Aprilia, ride next to Jorge Martin, and see what the two of you, if you two can just make an amazing impact on the grid with the two of you up there. And maybe developing the bike a little more in Maverick style and Jorge style than the style that Aleix had, which was a different style. Fabio Quartararo. I think it would be great if Rins stayed there and helped them develop the bike. I think that would be really cool. I'm not sure why. I mean, you have basically one more year, then you have a tech freeze, and then you're on to a whole brand new motorcycle that nobody has experience with. So I think it would be good if Rins stayed there. If Rins is just dying to get out, then boy, I think it would be great to see Rins on that bike next to Enea Bastianini on Gas. That would be really cool. Luca Marini. If Maverick wants to go there, great. Otherwise, I would put Johan Zarco there. In Gresini, who's going to go to Gresini? This is really interesting. I mean, you would think that maybe Miguel Oliveira would try to go to Gresini. I just don't know how they would feel about that. Maybe you just keep Alex Marquez to sort of raise up Fermin Aldeguer, because the way that he's riding right now, I think, and I think the folks from Everything Moto Racing, I think they're kind of saying, maybe they pulled the trigger a little bit too early on Aldeguer. Perhaps they did. Trackhouse, I would love to see Raul definitely on that bike next year. Definitely with current spec 2024. I really feel like Raul can do something. And I would love to see Joe Roberts next to him. But I could understand why, with the free agents that are out there, why perhaps Trackhouse might not want that. And they might want to get a free agent like I love Fabio Di Giannantonio. I think he's gangster. You can see why Gresini made that move. You can see that although he won a race last year and he was up at the front a lot, he's not in Marc Marquez level, because you can see that they have the same bike. I would love to see Ayagura come up there and take that spot right next to Johan Zarco. They need to bring guys up. That's my opinion. But then again, I'm not paying their salaries. So thank you everybody so much for tuning in to Full Throttle Moto 31. Hopefully the ladies will be back and speak with us. They're invited, but they have a lot of stuff going on. Maddie is going to resume Sekhmet Racing. I think you guys saw last week Alex Marquez put their logo, the Sekhmet Racing logo, on sort of like on, I hate to call it an intake, is on the upper air scoop, the upper wings. You could see where it had Sekhmet Racing International. I think that was awesome that Alex did that for Maddie's team. She's the team principal, so she will be there. I'm trying to remember where they're resuming at again in World SBK. I've been so tuned out to it, but I believe it's this weekend they're going to resume WSBK, which means you will get the Women's World Championship Racing in that same paddock that World Superbike is in. So I look forward to seeing what Mallory and Lizzie are going to do on because they haven't had their first race yet. They basically had kind of like a test day, so it's going to be really exciting. They just got in a new famous rider. I think her name is Beatriz. I'm trying to remember what her name is now, but a legendary female rider has joined that grid. So I think that is super duper duper exciting, and I can't wait for that racing to get going. I think Maddie was right on that this is going to be really really good racing, and I think it's going to open up doors for those ladies to get in these other categories, to get into World Super Sport, World Superbike, and I hope Moto 2 and MotoGP, because that's the ultimate goal. So hit me up on Twitter. So we are at so it's Throttle_31 on Twitter for the show. I am, as you can see, DJ at call_all_beings. And if you want to come on air and talk with me for the next show, if the ladies aren't available, and you are able to have a good conversation about MotoGP, you are invited to join me. All you need to do is DM me. We'll talk, and then we'll send you a link to be on the show. So it was a pleasure. Once again, we'll cite all the shows that we've referenced. Thank you to all the journalists out there who provide this amazing content. And now both at the MotoGP track and, that are like Simon Crafar and so forth. And then the journalists who go there and cover this, like Paddock Pass and the race and everything MotoGP. And obviously Matt Oxley and Peter Baum, even though I disagreed with you guys this week on something, we're all allowed to disagree, and I still have much respect. So for Maddie and Kayla, and all these opinions are mine, this is DJ saying peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. Looks like we got a nice left-hand corner coming up. Bye-bye, everybody.